the air is heavy, and I know people's hearts are heavy, and I know there are a lot of mixed emotions and a lot to process, and I'm reminded of that every time I speak to anyone, be they young, be they old. I'm struck by the number of people who are deeply affected by this that, frankly, don't ever say much at all publicly on social media, for instance. People that have spoken up on social media and are saying things about Charlie Kirk's murder that don't comment on much of anything. But the good news is, in all of it, I think the response, the national response, the international response, frankly. Have you seen these vigils that were popping up internationally? Have you heard the stories of churches overflowing over the weekend? Have you heard the stories? Have you read the testimony of people who said, you know what, I decided, in keeping with what Charlie did and wanted and the requests Charlie made of all of us, I decided to take myself or my family to church for the first time in decades? What a thing to come from something so vile. What a remarkable thing that the light of Christ would start to permeate into homes who never really gave a moment's thought to spending Sunday in worship with their families or convening with other believers and contenders for the faith. What a legacy. Just remarkable. This vigil that was, or memorial service, I guess if you want to call it, that was held at the Kennedy Center last night, sort of impromptu, done very, very quickly by Rick Grinnell, who runs the Kennedy Center. Tulsi Gabbard was there. There were a number of different people that spoke. From what I saw online, it looked like RFK Jr. actually got the most raucous reception of the evening. Let me give you some of that from last night. Number 43. This was at the Kennedy Center last night. RFK Jr. at the memorial service for Charlie Kirk.
I had a conversation once with Charlie where we were talking about the danger that we both face from challenging entrenched interests. And he asked me if I was scared to die. And I said to him, there's a lot worse things than dying. And one of those... and chief among those is losing our constitutional rights and having our children raised in slavery. And I said to him at that time, I said, sometimes our only consolation is that we can die with our boots on. We can die fighting for these things. Charlie gave his life so that the rest of us would not have to suffer those fates worse than death. Now it's our job, and he's no longer there to lead us, to rush in and fill the breach and win this battle for our country, for God, and for our families. Thank you all.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. How many of us think that there is a fate worse than death? Have you asked yourself that? When you say it in this context right now, first of all, I was glad to hear RFK Jr. say that because it confirmed what I suspected. Again, not personally knowing Charlie well, only having met him a couple of times. My suspicion, my hunch was, Charlie was profoundly aware of the danger he faced. And that every time he walked out the door of his home, he was a marked man, every day. And that confirms that I'm right. RFK Jr. said that he and Charlie very specifically had conversations. Are you afraid to die? Charlie asked RFK Jr. Now, if there's a man that knows something about political assassination, it's RFK Jr., yes? Are you afraid to die? Charlie asks RFK Jr., and he says, there's a lot worse things than dying. How many of us answer that way? The COVID era is what kind of steeled my resolve about this, to be honest, even before this event with Charlie. I've shared it before. I found that COVID was causing people to forego their freedoms. It was closing churches. It was closing schools. It was stopping people from worshiping together, leaning on one another. Alone together struck me at my core when I started hearing celebrities doing these at-home Zoom and stream things that were being broadcast, and they were encouraging us all to isolate, lock away, alone together. I hated it. I hated that more than anything, and I couldn't even for months figure out exactly why it haunted me the way it did. It's what RFK Jr. just said. It's a fate worse than death. There's a lot worse things than dying. Hiding, closing your church, not worshiping Jesus aloud with fellow worshipers, not being girded with your community of believers, that's a fate worse than death. I've said it before. I would rather die than allow modern medicine to butcher children. I would rather die than embrace the idea that modern medicine can alter a child to make him or her a different gender. That is a fate worse than death. I would rather not be alive. I'd rather lose my life defending speech. I'd rather lose my life contending for the faith. I'd rather lose my life fighting the notion that we must be alone together and close churches and schools. I'd rather lose my life. That's worse. It's worse, folks. Being alive and living under those conditions is worse than being dead. Because at least when I'm dead, I'm home with my Lord and Savior, and I don't have to live in an existence like that anymore. That's what a fate worse than death means. That's what it means when Charlie Kirk and RFK Jr. say there's a lot worse things than dying. So no, I don't want to spend the rest of my life trying to stay alive. It's actually scriptural. Spending more time trying to cling to this life than worrying about your salvation and your eternity. That's not, at least as believers. Now, if you're not a Christian, I respect you. I'm not picking on you like that. I understand your mentality may be different. But if you count yourself as a follower of Jesus Christ, you cannot wake up every day and worry about how am I going to preserve my life? How am I going to preserve my wealth? How am I going to hang on to my family? How am I going to protect me? We cannot be obsessed with trying to control the here and now. Control is a complete falsehood. It's a myth. We're not on defense. As contenders for the faith, we are on offense. There's a lot worse things than dying. I'd rather die with my boots on, said RFK Jr. in the battle. That's what Charlie did. A little more here, 44 from RFK Jr.
When my brother David died, I had a conversation with my mother, who had been through more than her share of loss and tragedy. And I asked her, does the hole that they leave in you when they die, does it ever get any smaller? And she said, no, it never gets any smaller. But our job is to build ourselves bigger around the hole. We do that. We do that by taking the best virtues and character traits of the person that we lost and using discipline and restraint and practice, integrating those character traits into our own character. And in doing that, we make ourselves larger and the whole gets proportionally smaller. And we also give that person a kind of immortality, because they are now living on, the best parts of them are now living on in us.
Discipline and restraint. Again, his politics are not mine on many fronts. But is there anybody, really, in modern American politics today quite like RFK Jr. in that he is hated, viscerally hated. And you know what he never does? Never. I mean, I have watched some of his own family trash that man in the most unbelievable way. I've never seen such hatred pointed directly at a guy like RFK Jr. simply for saying, I want to make kids healthier. I want to make the population healthier. I want to stop dying. I want people to stop dying. People hate his guts for it. Do you know he never meets that kind of speech with similar speech? Never. He never attacks the way he's attacked. He's a role model.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.